So as promised, I wanted to provide some ongoing updates on the case against Patreon. Now, I didn't really want to bore a lot of the people on the main channel who may not be interested, kind of like the behind the scene, what's going on, what I'm actually involved in, what I'm discovering, some of the work that I do. But some of you are interested in what's going on, so I'll post those kind of vlog style video, more informal video to this channel, which is the secondary channel called Legal Dissent. We'll still do weekly updates, probably on Tuesday during the live stream. We have a live stream every Tuesday at 8 p.m. So we'll talk about this case and provide some major updates during Tuesday, but on a more casual basis, I'll post these kind of videos to Legal Dissent. So yesterday was my first day of research into the Patreon antitrust complaint. Now, I had to go to a law library, and frankly, it's been a few years since I've been to a traditional law library. You might not know, but for over 20 years, a lot of the information that's in the traditional law library has been available online through LexisNexis and Westlaw. Those two companies pretty much dominate all the information available to attorneys, and to get people hooked on the digital content, they pretty much give it away for free, unlimited access to all law students. But once you leave law school, you realize that the cost of access is just astronomical. Most law firms cannot afford to have literally unlimited access to information. What they do is say, well, you need something very, very specific. We'll get you a subscription to that. Even that, you need multi-year subscription agreement with hundreds. Sometimes I've paid thousands of dollars a month over a long period of time to gain access to that. But it's extremely expensive. There's a law library about 45 minutes from my house. So I drove there and I spent maybe 5-6 hours there. So first I went up and down the aisle where most of the antitrust work is, most of the antitrust treatises are, and starting to take a look. Different treatises have been updated at different levels. Different ones focus on different subject matter. Found a couple of different treatises involving the areas that I'm really interested in. Open it up, went to sit down and actually start reading. And you start by looking at the very basic, kind of like seeing the basic outline of antitrust and see how the arguments develop. Actually spent quite a deal of time reading up a little bit about the history and how the legislation was actually passed, just to give me a bit of context into what I'm reading. And very, very quickly I tried to focus on what sort of elements need to be proven for an antitrust violation, and among them probably the single most important being concerted effort, right? Because many of you have seen a lot of different actions by different players online that you disagreed with. But when you asked me about it in the past, I told you, well, from a legal perspective, that will be looked on as conscious parallelism. The idea is that there are two events that seem to be very, very similar, but you cannot actually draw a connection. You cannot show an agreement between two players as to why they're acting together. You cannot show some sort of a written agreement, some sort of a verbal agreement. There's nothing connecting to them. For all practical purposes, the way the law looks at them, they're just two events that otherwise are parallel to one another, but there is no proof of connection. That changed over the past few weeks. First, we saw Patreon taking down Sargon of Akkad, more and more focus then being placed on people moving to a competitor of Patreon called Subscribestar, and PayPal almost immediately taking down Subscribestar. To me, that showed a potential evidence of collusion, what we're calling here, in fact, group boycott. Now, how do we go from that? How do we go from actually showing that there are two independent actions? How do we connect them so they legally can be considered concerted action? Well, that's what I'm focusing on. So what I did basically was go through the legal treatises, actually develop ideas as to what's involved in today's analysis of concerted action, what kind of elements come up in different cases. You know, there are always variation. Two courts are never quite the same, and try to develop a list of all the different cases that make up the current law as they deal with concerted action. My next phase of the game, what I'm going to do probably over the weekend, is actually try to pull all those cases down. So over the next week, I'm actually able to analyze all of those cases. Probably by next Friday, once again, I will go to the law library again, continue along the same path of looking at treatises, trying to develop certain basic ideas, trying to see where the cases are going, pull those cases down, and then read them over the next week. So this is where things stand now. It's obviously in a very preliminary stage of me trying to identify the most important cases, pull out those cases, actually go through, read them, understand some of the more fundamental elements. You definitely don't want to rely on somebody else's analysis, as in the treatise, about what the case say and what actually they stand for. You want to read that, but then again, you want to actually pull that information down and analyze it yourself. So this is where I'm going to do, and this is what's going to happen over the next week. Thank you so much for everybody that is supporting the channel in this particular effort. I really, really appreciate it, and I can't tell you how much your support has really helped. I'll see you next time.
When the lights are out